My name's Tom Hensley. I'm 41, and I've been living in Ross County, Ohio most of my life. I'm not a hunter or an outdoorsman. Not really. I mean, I grew up out here, so I know how to fix things, mow fields, feed chickens, stuff like that. But I've never had a thing for sitting in a tree stand or tracking deer. Not that there's anything wrong with it, just not my deal. I work maintenance at a school, and I've been doing that for the past 6 years. Before that, I did roofing, which tore up my back, and then warehouse stuff for a while. I guess I'm about as regular as a guy gets. I don't drink much anymore, don't do drugs. No real reason to lie about any of this. That's part of why I never talked about it before. I didn't want people thinking I was looking for attention, or worse, that I was losing my mind. I don't believe in ghost stories, or UFOs, no aliens or anything like that, and I never have. I always figured most of that stuff came from folks who want to see something, or were half asleep when they did. I've always been a see it to believe it type of guy. I gotta have it right in front of me, or I'll write it off. But something changed a few years ago. Between 2018 and 2021, I saw something out in the country, 3 different times, in the same general area. I still don't know exactly what it was, but I can't explain it away. I tried. Trust me, I tried. I just call it an upright canine because that's what it looks like, and that's what Linda Godfrey called them in her book when I read it, trying to make sense of what it was that I saw. They looked like a dog, or maybe a wolf, but walking around on 2 legs like a person. And not just standing up for a second either. I mean moving that way, like it was normal stuff for it. Now I don't expect anyone to believe me. That's not why I'm saying all this. I just need to say it. So I come to you, because I know you'll do justice for this story. The first time that I saw it was back in the late fall of 2018. I remember that for sure because the leaves were almost down and the field was all brown and dead looking. It was chilly, but not cold enough for snow yet. There's this old soybean field about a mile from my place, kind of wedged between some woods and a service road. I use it to cut across all the time when I was younger. There's a trail that skirts the edge of it, and I still walk it sometimes to get to my buddy Jeremy's house. That day I was heading that way. Figured I'd swing by to help him with a wood pile before it got dark. It was around 4 in the afternoon, still light out, but the sun was starting to drop and the shadows were getting long. I was just walking, not thinking about much, when I heard something rustling across the field. At first I thought it was maybe a deer, or a couple of them moving through the weeds, but when I looked up, it wasn't a deer. It was one thing, and it was tall. The dead grass and weeds out there were about 4 feet high, maybe a little more in some spots. Whatever this thing was, stood a good 3 feet above that, easy. I'd guess 7.5 feet, maybe more, and it was walking upright, on 2 legs, plain as day. It was covered in dark fur, kind of a charcoal color, and it had long arms that swung a little as it walked. Not like a person exactly, but not stiff like an animal either. There was a rhythm to it, and the way it moved, well, it didn't look clumsy or confused. It moved like it knew exactly what it was doing there on those 2 legs. Its head looked like a dog's, long snout, ears sticking straight up, but I couldn't see the legs or the feet real well, but the shape was all wrong for a person. I just stood there, watching it cross from one side of the field to the tree line on the far end. It didn't look over at me or anything, didn't act surprised or worried. It just kept walking, like it had somewhere to be. I watched it for maybe 10, 15 seconds. It was bright enough out that I could see it clearly. No shadows or tricks of light. This was the real deal. Then, right before it reached the trees, it dropped to all 4s, and that's when I got a good look at the legs. They looked just like a canine to me, walking on its toes and junk. The way it moved changed completely. It got real low, almost like a big cat stalking something, and then it was gone. Just slipped into the woods and disappeared. I stood there for a while. My heart was pounding like I'd just been chased. I didn't move. Don't even think I really breathed much. I just kept telling myself it had to be a bear or a big dog or something. But the back of my mind was already saying, Tom, you're a fool if you think that was something that you can just explain away. I know it wasn't anything that I could normally identify. Bears don't walk like that. Not for that long. And not that smooth. And dogs don't get that big, or walk on their back legs. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jeremy, not my brother, not even my girlfriend. I just kept it to myself. Figured maybe I was tired. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I saw. I wasn't losing it, and I wasn't hallucinating. I guess part of your mind just tries to explain it all away when you see something like that because you're so used to believing a certain way. But whatever that thing was, it was real. So then I see it a second time. This was maybe 7 or 8 months later. It was summer, July. I was working the late shift doing maintenance over at the county garage. I got off around 10:15 or so and was heading home, same way I always go. Back roads mostly, through a lot of open country. I was about 3 or 4 miles from that soybean field, so not far from it at all. It was dark out, no moon that night, but I had my brights on. I was coming around this bend where the woods pull tight on both sides of the road when something runs across about 50 yards ahead of me. It was fast, really fast, and it was on 2 legs again. At first I thought it was a person, maybe a jogger or something dumb like that, but then I saw the shape of it and my stomach dropped. This thing's head and shoulders were higher than the hood of my truck, and I drive a Ford F-150. It was tall, wide through the chest, and moved smooth, like it'd been running like that all its life. I could see the outline of my headlights just for a second. Long arms pumping, legs bent weird, kind of kicked back like a dog's. And the head had the same snout shape. The ears were up. It crossed the road in maybe 3 steps, just boom boom gone, and then into the woods on the other side like it was nothing. I slowed down quick and pulled over right there where it crossed. My heart was hammering, my palms were sweaty, but I needed to take a better look. I grabbed my flashlight out of the glove box and got out, even though every part of me was saying, don't do that. I shined the light into the trees, looked all around, but nothing. No sound, no eye shine, no movement. It was like whatever it was had just kept on going further into the woods. I stood there for a minute or two, just trying to make sense of it. I wanted it to be a wolf, or even a really big coyote running on its back legs, or even a messed up person in a costume. But again, my mind was telling me that it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. Deep down, I knew that it was something supernatural, but I still didn't have words for it. That's when I went home and started looking online for what it could be. I came across Linda Godfrey's website, and that's where I learned about upright canines. I read for a few hours, just looking up different encounters and seeing what people were sharing about their experiences. Believe me, I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that shape crossing the road in my headlights and those legs. I saw that head, the speed of this thing. It felt like it knew I was there, but it didn't care, just like the first time. Well, I didn't tell anyone about this encounter either. I didn't want people thinking that I was going crazy, that I was seeing wolfmen running around town. But now I was starting to wonder what the hell was going on out there. 2 times in less than a year? That's crazy. A few years went by. I pushed it out of my mind. Didn't think much of it after the first couple years. And then in early 2021, I saw it for the last time. Or at least, something like it. I help out an old farmer buddy of mine on weekends named Ray. He's retired now, but he still keeps busy. Has a couple of acres and a few old buildings on his land. That Saturday, we were clearing out his old barn. It hadn't been used for anything but storage in years. Just old lumber, rusted tools, junk like that. It was maybe 2 in the afternoon. Cold but sunny. One of those dry winter days where the sky is real clear. Ray's dog Bear, this big German Shepherd, was out there with us, just sniffing around doing his thing. And all of a sudden, Bear stops moving and just locks up, staring towards the edge of the woods behind the barn. His hackles are up, his tail's tucked low, and then he just starts growling. Not barking, just this deep, steady growl in his throat. I'd never heard him make a sound like that before. It was clear that he was trying to warn us that there was danger. Ray and I both turned to look. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I noticed this shape. This all too familiar shape. Tall, dark, standing half behind a tree, maybe 30 or 40 feet back from the tree line. You could only see part of it. The top half of the head, a shoulder, and one eye catching the light. Just enough to tell it was big and standing still, like it was watching us. It wasn't moving, but it also wasn't hiding very well either. It was almost like it wanted us to see just enough of it. Once again, I stared at the shape of this head. It was just all wrong. Too tall and too narrow. The ears perked up, the sloping forehead, that eye. But the way it looked at us made my skin crawl. It was like a person wearing a dog mask, but real. Just very real and very wrong. Bear wouldn't go near it. He whimpered a little, then backed up and went around behind the truck, tail between his legs. I'd never seen the dog act scared like that before. This dog is about 90 pounds. Couple years old, very capable of defending us. But with that thing right in front of him, he didn't want anything to do with it. I must have stared at that thing for a little over 10 seconds or so. Then it just stepped back like one clean step into the trees and it was gone. Ray muttered something under his breath like, "That ain't right." He didn't say anything else. I asked him about it later that night over a beer, and he just shook his head and said he didn't want to talk about it. I didn't push it. Truth is, I didn't want to talk about it either. But that feeling, that deep, heavy feeling like something was off in a way you can't put your finger on, that's always stuck with me, even after the first time I saw that thing. It's not the type of fear you get when you see a snake or get caught in a storm. It was worse, like whatever I saw wasn't supposed to be there, like it was breaking some rule by showing itself to me, and I got this deep feeling of dread, just saying, "You need to back away." Like I said, that was the last time I saw it though. But I still think about it a lot, and I still don't know what exactly these things are. I've read everything I can. I've read different theories and whatnot, but I'm not sure I 100% agree with anything that I read. Honestly, unless we have one of these things that we can study, I'm not sure we'll ever know exactly what it is. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to jump to conclusions. I'm not saying it was a werewolf, or Dogman, or whatever folks on the internet call it. I don't know what to call it, but upright canine fits what I saw. It moved like a man, but it wasn't a man. Looked like a dog, but it wasn't a dog. It's stuck in the middle of something, and that's what makes it so hard to explain. All I know is, it doesn't act like any normal animal. Bears don't walk like that. Coyotes don't stand up and watch you, and no normal creature gives off that feeling like something's seriously wrong, like you're not supposed to see it. The weird part is, none of the times I saw it felt random. The first time, it was crossing a field like it didn't care who saw it. Second time, it was out on the road like it was headed somewhere. And the third, it was just watching us. Like it knew we were there. Like maybe it'd been watching for a while, or even following me. Where it's been the last 4 years, I don't know. I hope I don't see it again. Sometimes I wonder if it lives out that way. Maybe it moves through the woods and the fields when it knows no one's around. There's a lot of backcountry out here, and I suppose plenty of places it can hide. We think we know what's out in the woods, but I'm not so sure anymore. I don't really go to that side of the county anymore. I haven't since the last time I was there with Ray. Like I said, it's not just fear, it's something deeper than that. Like I crossed a line. I've told a few folks I trust, but I'm not trying to convince anybody around here. I don't care if people believe me or not. I just needed to get it out there and say it out loud. So again, that's why I came to you. I don't really want to talk about it myself, but if I write it out, I feel you can relate that story. You can help me get it off my chest. I know what I saw. If you're ever out near those fields by yourself and the woods go quiet, just go the other way. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I just want folks to know something's out there. Something most people don't talk about and probably don't want to believe. Something the majority of the people listening to are never even going to see. But I saw it, more than once, and I don't think it's gone. I just think it's somewhere else. I get this feeling like it's still out there. Definitely in the same patch of land, same woods, just waiting for the right moment to show up again. So if you're out that way, keep your eyes open. And more importantly, trust your gut. My name is Caleb Dawson. I'm 42 years old, and I spent the last 19 years working as a land surveyor here in Maine. Most days, that means I'm out in the woods, walking property lines, marking boundaries, making sure people know what belongs to them and what doesn't. It's not glamorous, but I like it that way. I get to breathe the fresh air, spend hours among the trees, and do honest work with my hands, and that's enough for me. I've got a wife named Dana. Best woman alive, no contest. We have 6 kids together. It makes the long days worth it. We got a noisy house, cluttered schedules, more laundry than should legally be allowed, but I wouldn't trade any of it, not for a second. I love my life, and I don't take it for granted. Every sunrise I get to see is one more that some folks never got. In my line of work, I've seen bears, moose, coyotes, even the occasional mountain lion, though folks will argue with you about those things around here. I've been startled a few times, sure, but I've never felt afraid. Not real fear. Not the kind that crawls up your spine and burrows down into your gut. But that changed a few years back. One job, one afternoon, right out near the edge of Hancock County. It gave me a look at something I still can't explain. One afternoon changed everything. I don't like to talk about it much. Not because I'm afraid of being called a liar. I just don't like thinking about it. But lately, I've been feeling like I should get it off my chest. If nothing else, then just to say that it happened. To say I saw it, and that I walked away from it. Barely. It was an overcast afternoon. October, if I remember right. The kind of day where the clouds hang low and heavy, like the sky's thinking about rain but hasn't made up its mind just yet. I was out near a patch of private land, not far from a series of old logging trails that hadn't seen regular use in years. My job that day was routine, marking boundary lines for a guy looking to sell off part of his property. Nothing unusual about the spot. Thick forest, mostly tall pines. The ground was uneven, full of mossy rocks and hidden roots. It was quiet, too. No birdsong, no wind through the branches, just the occasional creak of wood. It was the kind of noise that makes you stop and listen without realizing that you've done it, because there wasn't much noise at all. I didn't know it yet, but something was watching me. I was maybe 2 hours into the job when I saw it. I'd just finished marking the northwest corner and was taking a short breather, leaning on a stump and sipping from my thermos. That's when something moved up high, just above my line of sight. There wasn't a rustle, it was more like this sudden awareness that something was there. I glanced up, thinking maybe it was a hawk or an owl tucked into the branches. But what I saw wasn't a bird. This thing was about 20 feet off the ground, nestled across 2 thick limbs of an old pine. And man, was it big. I mean, heavy big. My first thought was bear. Maybe a young one lying on its stomach, draped across the branches like I've seen them do in game cams. But even as that thought passed, I knew that that thing wasn't sitting right to be a bear. The shape was all wrong, too. The limbs were too long, the fur was too coarse. And then this thing turned its head towards me. Its eyes met mine. They were golden, sharp, and aware in a way that I can't describe. Not just aware, but focused. Its snout was long, like a wolf's, and its ears were pointed. They were flicking as they were catching every sound in the forest. The thing's body was lean, but powerful, all muscle beneath gray and brown fur, and its front limbs were arms, really, and they hung like a man's, ending in thick, clawed hands that gripped the branch with too much control to be any kind of dumb animal. It wasn't a bear, and it sure as hell wasn't a man either. It looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Like a werewolf, but not the movie kind. This wasn't snarling or drooling dramatically. It was still, like it knew it had the upper hand. Like it was just trying to figure out what I was. It didn't even growl. It didn't move. It just watched me. I couldn't move either. I was locked in place, my heart thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know if I should bolt or play dead or pray. I just stared back at this thing, trying to understand what I was looking at. And for some reason, I just felt it was doing the same thing to me. So we just stayed like that. Me on the forest floor, feet planted in the dirt, and it perched in the branches like some kind of ancient predator that'd seen nothing that would make it need to feel in a hurry. Neither of us moved. Time even got strange. It might have been 2 minutes, maybe 5. I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I was being watched in a way I've never felt before or since. And I wasn't just afraid. I was confused, like my mind couldn't wrap around what I was seeing. And underneath that fear, there was also something like a little bit of awe. This wasn't some bloodthirsty beast. It wasn't drooling and baring its teeth. Its calm demeanor was almost captivating. It was just perfectly still, like it was thinking, studying me as much as I was trying to make sense of it. The thought that hit hardest, though, the one that started crawling up my throat like bile, was about my family. About Dana. About the kids we'd raised together. About birthdays and camping trips and back porch dinners in the summer. I thought, if this thing jumps down, if it comes for me, that's it. That's the end of all of it. But it didn't jump. If anything, it just looked surprised, like it hadn't expected me to spot it. Maybe it was curious about me, just as I was terrified of it. Then, just as sudden as the fear had come, something in my gut told me that I had to go. Not because this thing was moving or coming after me, but because I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like where I was at was its place, and I'd crossed a line I didn't know existed. But I definitely did not feel welcome, and I knew that my time had run out there. But I didn't turn my back. I didn't run. I just took one slow step backwards, then another, eyes locked the whole time. Now this thing, it didn't blink the whole time I was moving. I kept backing up, one step at a time, my boots crunching louder than I wanted them to, and every noise felt like it echoed for miles. But still, that thing didn't move. It just stayed in that tree, crouched like it had all the time in the world. Those golden eyes glued to me like a scope. When I was maybe 20 yards out, I finally lost sight of it through the branches. But I still couldn't relax. I couldn't breathe easier either. If anything, the knot in my gut got tighter, because now I'd lost sight of it. So I didn't know if it was still up in that tree, or if it was coming down to follow me. I turned slowly, I think in a little bit of shock. I was still expecting to hear it leap down behind me, and if I did, I knew then the chase would be on. I was still thinking that I might feel claws tear through my back at any second. But, to my astonishment, the woods remained quiet. I started walking again, carefully, slowly, following the flag trail that I'd set earlier and thanking my lucky stars that I had a path that I could go right to the truck with. I didn't have to look around or find a way back. I could just follow my flags. The path back to my truck wasn't long. Maybe a 10 to 15 minute hike, but let me tell you, at that moment, it felt like it took an hour. About halfway through, though, I heard something. Off to my right. This very deliberate noise. Like whatever it was wanted me to know that it was out there without showing itself. I believe the term is wood knocking. Like this thing had gotten a big stick and was banging it across another tree. Maybe it was a warning that I needed to keep going. It wasn't constant, just now and then, like it was pacing me. But its message to me was clear. Get the hell out of my territory. And you know what? I obliged. I kept going. Because this thing was smart. I can say that for certain. Smarter than anything I've ever tracked or been tracked by. It stayed just far enough away to avoid being seen, but made enough noise to make it known that it was still there. Just enough to keep the pressure on me. And it worked. My skin was soaked with sweat. My shirt was clinging to me like I'd run a marathon. And every sound in that forest became a warning to me. I kept going, one foot in front of the other. No sudden movements, just calm. I never saw it again after the tree, but I knew that it was there. Somewhere along that trail, the smell hit me though. I hadn't noticed it before, not when I first saw that thing in the tree. But now with the wind shifting through the pines, it was there. It was faint at first, then stronger the deeper I got into the woods. Musty. Musky. Not like sweat, or rot. More like the scent of something wild. And it actually reminded me of a ferret that I used to have back in my 20s. It was that smell. Like it was earthy, sharp, and oily. And it lingered in the air like it had a purpose. I started wondering if that thing had scent glands like a skunk or a weasel. Maybe it used them to mark territory. Maybe it was a warning to others to stay out. Maybe it was a warning towards me. Maybe it was a way to talk without words. A signal that said, "This place is mine." Whatever the reason, I didn't like being able to smell it. I knew that meant it was still close. It made the whole thing feel like it had claimed the entire patch of forest long before I ever stepped into it, and I didn't know how far I would have to go to get out of its territory. I was trespassing, and I needed to get to safety. When I finally saw my truck through the trees, I almost dropped to my knees. I don't think I've ever been so relieved to see rusted metal and mud-caked tires in my life. I didn't run, but I definitely picked up the pace. The second I hit the gravel lot, I threw my gear into the bed, climbed into the cab, slammed the door, locked it like it would have stopped whatever that thing was, and then I got the hell out of there. As I drove, my hands were so sweaty that they kept slipping around the wheel. I could still feel sweat pouring down my back, and my heart wouldn't slow down even though I knew I was on my way to safety. And then every muscle in my body finally felt like it just unclenched. I never went back to that patch of woods. The guy who hired me called me a few weeks later and asked if I could finish the job. I told him I was booked and gave him the name of someone else. I didn't explain. I mean, what could I say? There's something in your trees that shouldn't exist? I was followed out of the forest by a werewolf? He would check me into a nut house. The thing never attacked me. It never so much as growled, but it didn't need to. Its message was clear as day. You're not supposed to be here. And I don't think it was just instinct or animal behavior. I think this thing knew. I think it made a choice not to come after me. Hell, maybe it pitied me. Or maybe it was curious about me. Maybe it didn't see me as a threat. But deep down, I believe that this thing let me leave. Because looking at that thing, it was built for killing. It could have easily taken me out. But for whatever reason, it let me go. Now people can laugh all they want. They can roll their eyes and say I saw a bear or had heat stroke or whatever helps them sleep at night. I've told a few folks, sure, my brother, one of my older kids when they were grown. But it's not a story I bring up unless there's a reason. I know what I saw. It looked like a werewolf, but it wasn't snarling. It wasn't out for blood. It was something else. Smarter. Older, maybe. Maybe something that werewolf legends came from. I felt like it belonged in the forest in a way that I never could. I was just a visitor, and I got lucky. This thing was part of the forest. And that day changed how I see the woods. I still work, I still hike, but I don't take shortcuts anymore, and I stay aware. And I don't take anything for granted. Not the sky, not my family. Definitely not the safety of my home. Because I know what's out there. And now, I'm pretty sure it knows me. My name is Rachel Morgan. I was 36 when this happened, back in the fall of 2010. I'm from Canada. I've worked as a pediatric nurse for most of my life. Nothing flashy, just a regular person trying to keep it together like anyone else. The year before, my husband of 12 years asked for a divorce. I found out there was another woman, someone from his office. It gutted me. We didn't have kids, and looking back, maybe that was a blessing. But still, when you build your life around someone, it knocks the wind right out of you when they leave. After he left, I spiraled for a while. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat much. I'd cry in the grocery store for no reason at all. But eventually, I knew I had to do something, anything, before I lost myself completely, and that's when I started hiking. Just local trails at first. I'd get up before dawn and be out the door with a thermos of coffee and a pack. It gave me a structure, a reason to get out of bed. And out there, in the woods, with no phones ringing and nobody needing me for anything, I started to feel like I could breathe again. There was a lake I found, about 45 minutes north of where I lived. It wasn't a tourist spot or anything, just a quiet place with a narrow path around the shoreline. I'd go there a couple times a week, especially when I needed to clear my head. That lake became my sanctuary. I never saw anyone else there, just birds, trees, the water, and whatever peace I could find in the stillness. I don't go there anymore. Not after what I saw. Not after that morning. It was September when it happened, just past 6 in the morning. I remember because the sun was still starting to come up as I parked at the edge of the trail. The air had that early fall chill. Not freezing, but enough to bite you if you weren't dressed for it. I had on a fleece jacket, hiking boots, gloves, and a wool hat. My thermos was tucked under one arm, steaming through the lid as I locked the car behind me. The trail to the lake was only about 15 minutes and mostly flat. The path wound through pine and birch, and in that quiet you could hear everything. Leaves crunching, the soft creak of tree limbs, your own breath. I liked that. It made me feel grounded. When I got to the lake, the fog was still lifting off the surface in thin patches. The water was like glass, calm and still, reflecting the trees like a painting. I walked down to the big flat rock I usually sat on and poured myself some coffee. That had become my little routine. Sit, drink, listen. Sometimes I'd see deer drinking on the far bank. Once I saw a bald eagle. But usually, it was just me in the stillness. There weren't any other cars in the lot when I pulled in, and I hadn't passed anyone on the trail. So that morning I knew I was alone. Not in a scary way. In a peaceful way. Solitary, but comforting. Like the forest was holding a space just for me. I remember thinking it'd be a good day for a longer hike. I had the whole day off and was feeling stronger than I had in months. That was before I saw it. Before everything changed. I was about halfway through my coffee when I noticed something in the water. At first, it didn't register, just a bit of movement in the middle of the lake. I thought it might be a loon or maybe a deer swimming across, which happens sometimes in the wilder parts of Canada. But as I focused, I saw it wasn't a bird. It was a head, and it was just above the surface, moving slowly but steadily towards the far shore. It was too far out for me to see clearly, but I could tell right away it wasn't a person. And it didn't move like a deer either. It was actually swimming like a dog, head above water, long strides, pushing forward with ease. That's what I told myself at first. Maybe it's someone's dog. Maybe a big husky or a shepherd out for a swim. But something just felt off inside of me. The head was big, like too big. It was broad across the skull, with a long, squared snout and tall, pointed ears that didn't move. It looked more like a wolf than any domestic dog, and even that didn't feel right. I've seen wolves before. This thing was a lot larger than them, and it looked heavier judging by the size of the head. It wasn't panicked or struggling like an animal usually does in the water. It swam like it had done it 100 times. It was smooth and graceful almost. Then I saw something else. Something that looked like it was dangling from this thing's mouth. I couldn't tell what it was exactly. Some kind of animal. Maybe a deer or a smaller type of game. Limp and motionless, half submerged in the water. Whatever it was clearly dead. My skin prickled, and I stopped moving. I just sat there staring, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. I wasn't scared yet. Not exactly. More curious, but also alert. But the longer I watched, the more I got this creeping feeling in my gut, like I was seeing something that I wasn't supposed to. It reached the far bank and began to slow down. I leaned forward just slightly, trying to get a better view, and I told myself again, it's just a wolf. A big one, maybe sick or carrying a kill to its den. But that's all it could be. That's all I wanted it to be. But deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. I watched it reach the shore across from me. The thing crawled out of the water on all fours, dripping wet. The carcass was still clenched in its jaws, and it did look like maybe a little fawn. It was hanging limp. The legs of whatever it was trailing through the mud. This thing stopped just past the waterline and gave a full-body shake, like a dog after a swim. Water flew off it in wide sprays, and for a second, I could see more of it. How wide the shoulders were, how long the limbs were compared to the body. It wasn't shaped like a normal animal. The front legs, or arms I guess, looked longer than the back, and its chest was too deep. Its whole frame was just wrong. Too long, too lean, too human in the proportions. But human in a completely exaggerated, muscular way. It stayed on all fours for a moment, still and silent. I sat frozen on my rock, barely even blinking, taking in every detail I could about this creature that was right in front of me. I thought maybe it was some kind of species of wolf that nobody ever sees. The fog was thinning, and the early sunlight filtered through the trees just enough to give me a clear look at this thing. The fur was dark, maybe black or dark gray, but soaked enough that it clung to the body in places, and you could see this definition beneath it. The muscles, the ribs. This thing wasn't some sick animal dragging itself through the woods. It was strong. And then, the craziest thing that I've ever seen happened. This thing stood up, like a man. I didn't see it brace or struggle or shift its weight like a bear might. It just rose up like I do when I'm sitting on the ground. Like this thing was built to do that. 1 second it was crouched, the next it was standing on two legs, tall and balanced. The carcass dropped from its mouth, and it bent down and picked it up with its hands. They weren't paws anymore. They were definitely hands, capable of grabbing things and holding onto them. They had length to them, and if I'm not mistaken, fingers. The way it grabbed that dead animal, it had a grip. It was a human motion. I couldn't see claws from that distance, but I didn't need to. My stomach turned at the sight of it holding something in that way. It just wasn't natural in the animal kingdom. The thing must have stood close to 8 feet tall, maybe even more than that. It was lean, but heavy in the shoulders and the chest. Its head, very canine. Long muzzle, upright ears, heavy brow. Even out of the water, it looked massive. But it turned in a way that reminded me more of a person than any animal that I've seen. It didn't jerk or twitch like a wild animal might. It looked meticulous. It didn't look at me, not directly, but I swear on my life it knew I was there. Like this thing could sense everything in ways that we couldn't. Like maybe it had an extra sense as well. And the way it stood, it was like it didn't care that I was there. Like I wasn't a threat, or even worth reacting to, and somehow that made it feel worse. And then it turned and started walking just like a man would, right into the trees, holding its kill under one arm. It stepped between the trees and disappeared without another sound. Not even a snapping twig, like it had done this before, like it owned the place. And that's when the fear really hit me. Not like I was startled, not even panicked. The fear I felt was deeper than that. It was the kind of fear that lives in your bones before your brain can even explain why. Like I'd just seen something that didn't belong in this world. Something that wasn't supposed to exist at all. Yet here I was, with the knowledge that these things are real. And I needed to get out of there because now I was starting to feel blind panic. My hands were shaking. My coffee had gone cold. Every instinct told me to leave, but for some reason I still hadn't moved. I felt like if I did, it would somehow notice me after all, and maybe feel like a chase. Now, I don't remember standing up. One moment I was frozen on that rock, and the next I was gathering my things with my hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept glancing across the lake, but that thing was gone. I scanned the shoreline left to right. I looked at the shoreline on this side of the bank, making sure that I was still alone. It was like the trees had swallowed that thing up. I tried to tell myself that it was over. Whatever it was, it didn't come after me, that it didn't want to. It hadn't even acknowledged me, but that didn't bring me much comfort. If anything, it made me feel like I didn't matter at all, like I was nothing to this creature. That was the moment that it hit me. How alone in the woods I actually was. And I suddenly felt very stupid for being out here alone. There were no other hikers, no cell service this deep into the woods. Just me, standing at the edge of a lake with miles of forest between me and my car, and some kind of monster maybe in between me and the car. I packed up quickly. I didn't run. I wanted to, trust me. I wanted to break into a full sprint, but some instinct told me not to. Running felt like the kind of thing prey would do, so I forced myself to walk, fast and calm but steady. I kept looking over my shoulder the entire way back. Nothing was there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something could be. I'd never felt like that in the woods before. I'd never felt hunted. Listening to other accounts since I've had my encounter, these things are stealthy. It could have been right there in the forest watching me and I never would have known. I'm glad I got out of there when I did. I made it up to the car without seeing anything else. I got in, sat there with the engine running, gripping the wheel, trying to breathe and calm myself before I drove off. I didn't want to panic and crash into something and then be stranded out there with that thing. After I got home, I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Not for a long time. What was I supposed to say? That I saw a wolfman dragging a dead animal into the trees? Who would believe that? I barely even believed it myself, and I was the one that witnessed it. I never went back to that lake, not once. I'd spent months calling it my sanctuary, but after that morning, it felt like the woods had let me see something I wasn't meant to, and I couldn't pretend that it was peaceful anymore. Something was out there. Still is, probably. And I want nothing to do with it. I've been driving rigs for over 20 years now. I started when I was just shy of 25, and I've been at it ever since. My name's not important. I've hauled freight across all lower 48 states, day, night, rain, snow, you name it. I've done it. I've seen just about everything there is to see out on the road. Busted tires, flip trailers, fireballs on I-10, meth heads wandering the shoulder with no shoes on, even a tornado one time in Oklahoma. But I'm not one for ghost stories or UFO crap. Never have been. I keep my eyes on the road, my hands on the wheel, and my ass in the seat. I've never been interested in tall tales or campfire nonsense. When you live life 1 mile marker at a time, you learn real quick that stories don't get the job done. Work does. Now, a lot of truckers are superstitious. A lot of them have a lot of stories that you won't really believe. But I know what I saw that night, and it kind of changed the way that I look at things. I don't usually talk about what happened that night in Texas. Most folks would laugh, and I wouldn't blame them. Hell, if someone told me the same thing, I probably wouldn't believe it either. And no, I wasn't drunk. I wasn't tired or half asleep. I hadn't been popping pills or smoking anything. Just me, wide awake, parked in a quiet little truck stop in the middle of nowhere. It was the middle of the night. Nothing but silence and a sky full of stars around me. This isn't a story I tell strangers. But sometimes, if I'm having a smoke with another driver I trust, someone who's been on the road long enough to know that not everything out there makes sense, well, sometimes I'll tell them about that night. The night I saw something out in a field that still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was back in 2005, early spring. I was cutting through a stretch of Texas that most folks never heard about. Can't remember the highway number off the top of my head, but it wasn't an interstate. 2-lane blacktop that ran flat and straight for miles in every direction. You get stretches like that out here where the towns are barely dots on a map. It was late, probably 2:30 in the morning. I'd been driving a long haul from Arizona towards Shreveport. It was mostly a solo freight. Lumber. Nothing urgent. I was ahead of schedule, so I figured I'd pull over for a bit. There was this old truck stop just off the road. There was no name that I can remember. No sign. Just a stop. Just one of those little rundown places that probably hasn't changed since the 70s. There were 2 fuel pumps there, old and faded. A flickering fluorescent sign above the roof. One squat building, probably had a diner and a cashier counter, but the open sign and that fluorescent sign weren't lit. It looked like it'd been closed up for the night. Hell, maybe it had been closed up for a while. I didn't see another truck in sight, not a car, No sign that there was any life at this stop at all. I parked in the corner of the lot, facing away from the pumps, shut off the engine, and cracked both windows just enough to let some air in. Texas nights can get warm, even in the spring. I didn't bother to get out. I just leaned back in the seat, grabbed a lukewarm thermos of coffee from the passenger seat, and turned on the radio. It was mostly static, but I did manage to catch some AM talk show. One of those guys yelling about politics or aliens, but I wasn't really listening. What struck me first was how quiet it was outside. No bugs, no distant trucks rumbling by, just this eerie kind of stillness. The one that you only really notice when it's absolute. I remember thinking that the world just felt empty at that point, like it was on pause or something. Out past the edge of the parking lot, about 40, maybe 50 yards out, was an open field. It was flat land, just some brush, maybe a fence line or two, and beyond that, a thin strand of trees. Nothing fancy, just Texas scrub. That's where I first saw the movement. I spotted that movement out of the corner of my eye. Just a flicker, really. Something low to the ground. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Probably a coyote, maybe a stray dog, or even a deer. You see all kinds of things on the road, especially at night when you're parked in the middle of nowhere. I'd seen my fair share of wildlife around there. But something about the way it moved caught my attention. It wasn't running exactly, more like it was gliding through the field. It was smooth and steady like it had a purpose. It wasn't moving like it was skittish like a deer, and it wasn't loping like a coyote. Something just struck me as odd immediately. I leaned forward and squinted, trying to get a better look through the windshield. It was too dark to make out anything clearly. I reached across the cab and grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, rolled the window down a bit more, and clicked it on. There wasn't any eyeshine. Usually, if it's an animal, that beam will catch something. Yellow, green, even red sometimes, but this thing didn't flash back at me at all. Just stayed low and moving. I kept the light steady, trying to follow it, but whatever it was really good at keeping out of the light. After a minute, it came closer to the edge of the field, maybe 25 or 30 yards out now. Enough moonlight was hitting it at that point that I could start to see the outline of it better. That's when I stopped thinking it was a regular animal. You see, this thing was moving on two legs. It was tall, taller than a man, at least 7 feet, hell, maybe even more. It wasn't standing up straight either. It was hunched forward, arms hanging low, long fingers that almost touched the ground, legs bent like a dog's hind legs. The body was built thick, muscular, covered in dark fur that caught the moon just a little bit. But the head was the part that was the most wrong about this entire situation. It looked like a wolf or a German shepherd. Long snout, pointed ears up top, big shoulders behind it. But whatever this thing was, the proportions were nothing like a wolf or a German shepherd. This thing had monster written all over it. It didn't make a sound. It moved in absolute silence. Now you think werewolf and you think howl, but this thing was absolutely calm and silent. It just moved through the grass with its head pointed down. I think it was tracking something. I watched it sniff around a patch of ground for a while, real methodical, like it knew exactly what it was doing. And that was the moment I stopped trying to explain it away. Because maybe all those tall tales that the truckers tell, maybe they all have some factual evidence to them. For a second, I told myself maybe it was some guy in a costume. Maybe there was some weird event happening nearby. Hell, maybe it was even a prank, but none of that sat right with me. The way it moved, it wasn't clumsy or exaggerated like someone trying to act like an animal. There wasn't any hesitation or stiff joints. Every step it took looked natural, like it was built to move that way. It was fluid and balanced and perfectly comfortable on two legs. I didn't move. I just sat there in my seat, keeping as still as I could, watching it through the windshield, one hand still holding the flashlight, but I didn't bother shining it anymore. I didn't want to draw any more attention to myself. This thing, it probably already knew I was there. I had shined a light right next to it. But all it did was keep sniffing the ground, working in these wide loops like it was trailing something that I couldn't see. A few times it paused, head tilting like it caught the scent or heard something. Each time it stopped, my heart stopped. Then all of a sudden it stopped moving completely. It turned its head to me, not its whole body, just the head, and it looked straight toward the truck. I couldn't see the eyes, not clearly, but let me tell you this, friend, I felt those eyes. It was like a pressure in the air just changed, like a quiet suddenly got a lot heavier. It knew I was there. There was no denying that. I held my breath. I didn't even blink. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might echo off the windows. I didn't even reach for the keys. I didn't want to shift in my seat or make any noise to draw its attention towards me even more. I just kept absolutely still, hoping that it would lose whatever interest it had in me. I wasn't thinking about guns or escape plans. I was thinking about how thin that windshield really was, about how loud the engine would be if I started it, about how I couldn't get away from it before it got to me, even if I did manage to turn the truck on and get out of there. But it didn't charge or get aggressive. It just stared at the rig for a moment, long enough to make me feel pinned, and then it turned back towards the trees. It walked off slow, like it wasn't in any rush, like it had time, like it knew there was nothing I could do about it anyway. It stayed out there for a long while, maybe 10 minutes, give or take. Never came any closer, never acted aggressive, just kept moving through the field, sniffing, pausing, searching. And then, like it was done, it just turned toward the tree line. Maybe it lost the scent of whatever it was looking for. Maybe it decided that it wasn't worth it. Who the hell knows? But the way it moved, let me stress, there was no panic. Just these calm, steady steps. It disappeared into the brush without a sound. No crunch of leaves, no snap of twigs, nothing. And then it was like it was never there at all. The way it moved made me feel like it was some kind of jungle cat. How they can move through the jungle without making any sound, even though there's so much grass and weeds and plants on the ground. I sat there in the cab for a long half an hour. I barely moved. Still didn't turn on the key. Just kept my eyes on that field, waiting to see if it would come back, but it never did. Eventually, when I was sure it was gone, I started the engine. Even that felt too loud, like I was breaking some kind of spell. I rolled out of that lot slow, headlights off until I was almost back on the highway, and didn't stop again until I hit the state line. I've been on the road a long time, and I've never seen anything like that before or since. No tracks, no stories in the paper. Just one long, quiet night in Texas that I don't like to talk about unless I really trust the person I'm talking to. You don't have to believe me. I don't care. I know what I saw. It wasn't a man, and it damn sure wasn't a dog.